had a report that Dr. Roger K. Leir, also known worldwide as the alien implant doctor, passed away this Friday, March 14th, 2014. He leaves behind an enormous legacy of work very few people have had the courage to face. With over 17 implants removed over a period of 20 years, Dr. Leir had the courage to stand up in the face of mainstream science and academics by having them look at the raw data. All of us at Third Phase of Moon and the UFO community will miss him, especially his extremely warm heart. He was larger than life and will always be remembered. Now again, let's watch the Alien Human Project when he last spoke with us at Third Phase of Moon. Welcome back to Third Phase of Moon. My name's Blake Cousins. In this groundbreaking documentary, we're going to explore alien abduction and strange implants extracted from people from around the world. Dr. Roger Leir has performed 16 surgeries and has removed 17 implants that are extraterrestrial in origin. We'll show you the objects he's removed and reveal why they are described as a smoking gun that prove that visitors from other planets are routinely visiting Earth and keeping tabs on the inhabitants. Also, we'll be speaking to alien abductees and patients of Dr. Roger Leir who've had alien implants removed from their bodies. 15-year-old Jack Graham will be our special correspondent on location in Los Angeles, asking Dr. Roger Leir the questions: if we are alone in the universe. As one of the most eloquent and intelligent investigators of extraterrestrial life, we'll hear Dr. Leir's observations on why the aliens are interested in our planet and what their plan is for the human race.
Now, where in the body do most implants usually come from?
Well, that's an interesting question of where we find them in the body. What we've come to the conclusion is that they have to be in areas that are relatively superficial and near a bone. We've never found one in a body cavity such as the thorax or the abdomen or the brain. Now, we've also come to the conclusion that maybe this is necessary because the electronics of the mechanism, we found that this may be necessary because it's broadcasting a signal. And when you broadcast a signal, at least according to human technology, you have to have an antenna. And what better antenna could be than the skeleton of the body? It contains all the minerals necessary for an antenna. So perhaps that's why they're in such association with bone. The other aspect of it is if you're doing millions of these, and you're doing them all over the world, and there's a large number of abductees. The Roper poll in 1993, 1996 said that at least 2% of the American population is involved in alien abduction, and that was a conservative poll because there's a lot of people who are not going to want to answer these questions at all. And then if you multiply that by the world's population, you're talking about a lot of people. So to get remote information as to what is going on within the human body, like we tag bears, we tag porpoises and whales and so on, and we can study their habits, how long a bear hibernates, what their metabolism is during the wintertime and so on. Even John Glenn, or an astronaut, complained on national television that he had to swallow implants because mission control had to have that physiological information. Now, one of the things that we haven't talked about at all is why are implants there in the first place?
Now, why exactly do you think that implants are necessary?
Well, I think, again, based on human logic. And let's say, the human race is in a state of infancy, because we haven't been around that long. A race that may be hundreds, thousands, or maybe millions of years older than we are may not use the same logic as we do. So the answer I'm going to give you is based on our human logic. it looks like to me that the entire human race is being genetically re-manipulated again. Because if you look at the children born within the last 60, 75 years, they are not the same human as a person who was my age. In fact, a gentleman by the name of John White, who used to put on UFO conferences in the state of Connecticut, years ago recognized this, and he came up with the term Homo noeticus. Instead of Homo sapien, Homo noeticus, and that means new human. If you listen to what a child has to say today, and ask them or get a feeling for where they get their knowledge from, it's not from a book, it's not from TV, it's not off the computer. They already know it. It's a different kind of human being. So if you're doing a genetic manipulation on a population, you might want to know exactly what's going on genetically without having to abduct the individual again. So you would do it remotely, like, as I stated previously, with what we do with lesser animals. Now, would you, for example, reach into the ocean and pull out a fish and tell the fish, I'm going to put a tag on you so I can know what your swimming habits are or what you eat? No, they would just we would pull the fish out, do our thing, put them back. We do it with manatees. I just watched Animal Planet this morning. The manatee doesn't know they have a broadcasting device. We don't explain it to them, that we want to learn about their metabolism and their eating habits and so on. So they just do it. Well, that's, kind of what they're doing with us. They put these devices in so that possibly they can gain remote information without ever having to come back and abduct us again. Now, which is another interesting thing. I've been asked, well, how come I can take them out?
Do aliens want it to be found?
That's a good question. Do aliens want it to be found? And if they didn't, I guess I wouldn't be taking them out. And then I get asked, well, who else is doing this? And as far as I know, I'm the only person in the world. And I did research. Prior to the time I did the first one, even though I thought it was going to be a funny joke, I wanted to see how many implants were taken out previously. And all I did was I read through the UFO literature, and I saw that things were taken out. They turned to powder, they disappear, they dropped, they did this, they did that, but nobody ever came up with anything. And so I do cases and I come up with actual physical objects that can be sent to material scientific laboratories and get opinions. I mean, I can't explain that. That's strange. And if somebody had told me, 50 years ago that I would ever be doing anything like this, or would have traveled to 42 countries, or have done the things that I've done, or done the television programs and radio programs I've done, I would have told them they were nuts.
Now, I know you've removed many implants. How similar are the implants to one another? Are they each clones of themselves, or do they vary?
Well, the implants that we have removed in the past, we have about 7 that look exactly the same. And if you lined them all up on gauze sponges, you would never tell one from the other. We have a few that are different, but I have synthetically divided them into 3 categories. Ones that are metallic and covered with a biological coating, ones that are non-metallic, and one that is biological. And each operates a little bit differently. But the 7 that we have that are metallic rods with biological coatings are virtually all the same.
Interesting. Now, do you personally believe that you've been contacted by aliens?
I would have to say the answer to that is yes. I can tell you an episode that occurred with my family, my daughter and myself, in Laughlin some years ago, which I wrote a book, I wrote a part of a book called Chopped Liver. And we talked about that incident, but during the awards banquet that we were having at the conference, I was asked to come outside with my family. So there was a lot of people who were lined up at the fence along the Colorado River. And we were in back of a lady in a white dress, and I said, what's going on? What's happening here? She said, oh, you missed them, you missed them. There was about 7 of them out here. And I said, 7 what? She said, 7 craft.
Wow.
And I said, oh, well, I started looking around and I didn't see anything. And, you know, if you start staring at objects in the heavens, your eye muscles begin to twitch. And I thought, well, you know, these people are having what's called nocturnal nystagmus is the word for it. And then suddenly, like in the movie A Beautiful Mind, where you can look up at the heavens and you can find any geometric concentration of stars that you want to see. There's thousands, millions of them there. You know, so our attention was called to a triangle of stars. Now there was a big, bright, full moon, really bright. And right below the moon was this triangle of stars. And the whole 40 people seemed to be concentrating on this triangle of stars. And then suddenly the bottom 2 stars started to move. And they came downward and they went into a pair and they slowly went towards the corona of the moonlight and disappeared. And at the same time, I think everyone there got a telepathic message. Yes, we're here, believe it, bye-bye. And my daughter, who was about 12 years old at the time, said, Dad, are those folks coming back again? So, yes, I believe I have been contacted by non-terrestrial beings.
That's fascinating. Now, what would you say is the most credible argument you've ever heard for abduction?
Well, the most credible argument that I've heard for abduction in the cases that we've done surgery on would be very hard to delineate, because when we set up our set of criteria and protocols, the individual must have some kind of a memory of being associated with the abduction phenomena. When Bob Bigelow or NIDS decided to take on this responsibility of doing the metallurgy, I had to do some studying so that I could just interpret what they had to say. And I started getting reports back, and the first report we got back was they were comparing, this was Los Alamos National Laboratory. Mm-hmm. They were comparing these to meteorite samples.
Wow.
Well, we know somebody didn't step on a meteorite or get one whacked through the back of his hand. It wouldn't
so it has to come from outer space.
Had to come from outer space, and they're calling them meteorite samples. So that was rather mind-blowing. So that was the beginning of the scientific aspect. So I figured, well, you know, if we're going to carry on with this, we better set up some scientific protocols and criteria for doing this kind of work. And then we formed our 501c3 nonprofit organization, ANS Research, and no charges were then ever made to any of the surgical candidates.
I see. Now, I know, because you've written a lot of books, clearly, people must have heard about them. How many people ask you, can you inspect me and see if I have any alien implants inside my body? Do you get a lot of emails per day?
Well, I get a tremendous amount of emails, sometimes 3,500 a day.
Wow.
And yes, we have now instituted a methodology, a scientific methodology, for looking at the possibilities of whether somebody might have an object in their body. And Steve and I both have equipment that we can go, for example, to a conference.
Let's say, tomorrow an alien revealed himself to the general public. How would you say people would react? Would there be mayhem and riots, or how would it go?
Well, if the alien presence were known suddenly, one day, for example, I like to use the example of a huge multi-football field alien craft landing on a busy freeway during rush hour. would there be a panic? The answer is yes, there would be a panic, because people would be on their cell phones calling Caltrans to see how long they were going to have to sit there before that thing got out of the way so they could go back to get home to watch the Lakers game. But see, it just indicates the quality of life that we have here in the United States. Probably the least important thing of an individual who lives in the United States, at least, is extraterrestrial beings. As long as it doesn't interfere with you personally, then it could be fine, or it could be not fine, or who cares? But because that relationship has been made fun of for so many years, well, we don't even take it, the common person doesn't even take it seriously. So the world is changing, and the world has got to finally know the truth. Government sources and private industry has taken over most of the knowledge of, the extraterrestrial presence.
Yeah. I guess, do you have any good guesses as to why aliens would contact us? What makes us stand out that aliens would want to put their implants inside of us?
Well, I think in order to understand what the alien approach is to human life on Earth, we have to have a good understanding of our history, which we don't, and which nobody seems to care about except a few. But if you go back and you look at ancient history, and you look at ancient paintings and wood carvings and so on, even liturgical paintings with Jesus, you're going to look up and you're going to see a typical saucer UFO craft flying around, even back in those days. So, we don't know where we came from. We've been looking for the missing link for year after year after year. Where's the missing link? If we look at the writings of Zecharia Sitchin, the late Zecharia Sitchin just passed away, and he wrote a set of books called the Earth Chronicles. And he says that 435,000 years ago, from another planet in our solar system called Nibiru, the group or race of individuals called the Anunnaki came here, and their head geneticist, whose name was Enki, manipulated what was already here into human beings.
Wow.
So if we don't understand the history of where we came from in the first place, how can we possibly understand the present or the future of where we're going with all this?
Jack Graham will now speak to Stephen Colburn, chemist and material scientist, in regards to the implants removed by the alien abductees.
So, can you tell me a bit about yourself and your role within this program?
Yeah, my name's Steve Colburn. I'm a material scientist. I was educated at UCLA, and I work in Camarillo, just a few blocks from where Dr. Leir works. And after we met, we decided to have a collaboration on analyzing these objects more thoroughly. A lot of the objects that he removed had not been analyzed adequately, so I've done a lot of microscopy and elemental analysis on these objects and come up with some interesting findings. One thing we found out is that the devices are definitely nanotechnological devices. They're not just simply metallic objects that somehow got into the body. They contain carbon nanotube electronics, and carbon nanotubes are the field I'm working in my regular job. And they give off radio signals, and they have odd nanostructures in them made of carbon nanotubes. Carbon nanotube electronics are a hot topic in material science today, by the way, and there's many amazing properties about them, and the aliens have apparently perfected the technology to use carbon nanotubes in these devices. And there are proprioceptor nerves that go into these the tissue capsule or gray membrane around these devices. And one of the most fascinating findings was that that these devices contain many of them contain meteoric iron from the judging from the trace element pattern of gallium, germanium, precious metals like iridium and platinum. And iridium is not found on Earth in any great amounts. And we did the isotopic analysis of various elements from the metallic cores of several of these devices and found out that they were made from off-planet material, extraterrestrial material. There's a certain pattern of isotopes for each element on Earth, and if that pattern is varying by more than 1% or so, then it's the conclusion can be drawn that that the material came from off-planet. Some of the isotopic ratios and the elements in these devices are extremely skewed compared to, quite unlike the isotopic ratios of elements on Earth. In fact, Dr. Kuntz, our colleague who's also involved in the research, concluded that they probably came from somewhere else in the galaxy. They don't even seem to be from our solar system. These devices have carbon nanotube networks inside the metal. So they're obviously manufactured devices, and they seem to be well beyond the technology of civilian science at this point.
So it's not possible that something like the nanotubes could be made through nature. It has to be manufactured.
No, they were discovered in 1991 in Western science. The Russians discovered them perhaps 10 years before that, but they're not known to be found in nature, and certainly not in meteorites.
So there's no way that it could be faked, really?
No, I don't think so. Some people have argued that these devices could be made by black government projects, but I think that the fact that they contain extraterrestrial material argues strongly against that.
So what you're saying that it was discovered in 1991, right? The nanotubes?
Yeah, and many of these objects date from well before the discovery of carbon nanotubes in science on Earth. These people reported that these objects were put in 30, 40 years before a lot of times.
So when you say nanotubes, do you mean that these things can be used to store information, perhaps?
Yeah, they can be made into electronic networks. Carbon nanotubes are let me give you a little bit of background. Graphite is a hexagonal array of carbon atoms, and these layers are stacked. If you take one of these layers, one of these hexagonal arrays of carbon atoms, and roll it up into a tube, that's a carbon nanotube. And there's various types of carbon nanotubes with different numbers of walls, and single wall are the most studied right now, and these contain single wall carbon nanotubes. Single wall carbon nanotubes are often less than a nanometer in diameter. These are small diameter single wall carbon nanotubes that are in these devices, and those can be used as electronics because there are metallic and semiconducting single wall carbon nanotubes.
So you're saying this is very tightly stacked, and if you took out if you laid it end to end, it would definitely be a lot larger than it would. So all this information is tightly stored together, compacted?
Yeah, I would think so, yeah. The total length of the carbon nanotubes in one of these things might be several miles. I haven't figured it out, but
wow.
It's got to be a lot.
So the technology used to compact that much information so tightly seems to be pretty futuristic.
Definitely. I don't understand how the metal could actually be put around the carbon nanotubes without destroying the nanotubes, because the melting point of these metals is like 1500 degrees Celsius, and if you poured molten metal over the carbon nanotubes, it would just destroy them or convert them to metal carbides.
So would it be possible to say that the information required to make one of these carbon nanotubes isn't readily available on Earth? It must have come from somewhere else?
We can make carbon nanotubes, but to make a 3D intricate composite like this with carbon nanotube electronics inside the metal, that's well beyond our technology at this point. We've speculated that they might be physiological monitoring devices or listening devices. They're definitely relaying information about the subject to the aliens through radio signals. They're not always transmitting, so...
Have you noticed actual radio signals emitting from it?
We've detected radio signals coming from them, and in two of my reports we outlined some of the frequencies that they give off. The last two devices we detected radio signals from.
Are they common radio signals that are found on Earth?
Some of them are aeronautical and satellite communication frequencies, but there's also very high frequency microwave discharges as well.
So could it be possibly dangerous to have a lot of microwaves emitting from inside a person?
I wouldn't say it's a lot of microwaves. We've only detected perhaps milliwatt levels of power, but it's hard to say. There's been no ill effects noted from anybody having these devices inside them.
What about after the surgery? Has it
In fact, they don't have any rejection or immune response by the body.
So that it's possible to not even notice these tiny things in your body.
Yeah, most people don't notice them at all.
So would it be fair to say
they see them on an X-ray?
Would it be fair to say that there might be a lot of those in a lot of different type of people?
Oh, that's very safe to say.
Wow.
Some of the frequencies that we've been able to gain some knowledge of from classified information is that they are deep space, fixed or mobile deep space frequencies. And that presents quite a conundrum because what advanced civilization would be using radio wave to begin with?
So do you think it'd be possible that the government could know about these nanotube technologies?
I think they know about them. I don't think they can reproduce it as yet. It's anybody's guess how much technology the Black Project community has. Some of their stuff is reverse engineered alien technology, reportedly.
So would it be possible to take this apart and perhaps learn the secrets of what's inside it and perhaps use it for our own technology?
That's what we'd like to do at some point. We'd like to take one of these devices and mount it vertically on a scanning electron microscope mount and take an elemental map of one layer of the object, then etch away a layer with a beam of fast atoms, and then do the next layer and get a three-dimensional structure of the object that way.
How strong is the object? Is it easy to break?
This one, I don't know. I haven't tried to cut it yet. Most of them are fairly easy to break. I've cut 4 so far, and 3 of them are fairly easy to break. One was immensely strong and could not be cut at all. With even diamond tools wouldn't scratch it. It appeared to be some kind of highly advanced iron metal matrix composite with carbon nanotubes.
You mentioned there was a sort of biological capsule that surrounded it. Would that be used to protect it, to prevent it breakage?
No, I don't think it's to protect it. I think it's to organize the neural input to the device somehow.
Is that if we were able to back engineer some of the technology that we have in these devices, we could prevent, for example, inflammatory processes and rejection. In other words, if we could make something similar, you could wrap a heart, a kidney, a screw, a pin, or whatever in it, instill it into the human body, and the person would not have to take any anti-rejection medication for the rest of their life. So that this was presented in a report, which is in the White House, that I have a copy of from the OSTP. That's the Office of Scientific Technology and Policy, and that was handed to Obama at the time when he was trying to raise money for his medical health care problem to get Congress to approve the money.
Will President Obama, with the help of Congress, fund this medical research and reverse engineer these implants? If so, the implications could help medical technology beyond our imagination. Now, we go to the most incredible account of alien abduction explained by Dr. Roger Leir to Jack Graham.
3 young children, about 9 or 10 years of age, who lived in Tennessee. And they decided to go out on a little local camping trip. So not too many blocks away, it was kind of like an empty field and so on. So they packed their primitive sort of gear, which was blankets and things of that nature, and things to cook over a fire, marshmallows and so on. And they went out, and they didn't even have a tent. They used sticks. They gathered sticks and they put the blanket over the sticks to act as a tent. And they roasted their marshmallows and told jokes and so on. Well, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, they noticed that there was a very bright star up ahead, above them. And the 3 of them all concentrated on this star because it was so bright. And the 3 of them watched as this star descended closer and closer and closer. And as it got closer, they saw that it was a craft. The next thing that happened was that when the craft was about 50 feet over their heads, a beam of bluish-white light in a cone came down over the 3 of them, and they began to levitate up in this cone of light. Now, if someone had done that to me at my age, I'd have a little bit of trepidation because, if you're going up in a cone of light, I mean, the first thing that would come to my mind would be the fear of
Panic.
falling back down.
Yeah.
There's nothing holding you. But they had the absolute opposite feeling. Oh, wow, this is fun. We're having fun, we're going up in this light. So they get up into the craft, and then they're in a round room that kind of looks like a hangar. And there are typical bumper sticker gray beings that are there. And so they say, what's happening? Man, what's going on? I said, have no fear, you're going to be returned, you'll be fine. We're just going to take a look at you folks for a few minutes and so on. But their fear was in being separated. Greater fear for each other than for each as an individual. Then when they finally were separated, they were taken down different corridors that went off this room. And under hypnotic regression is when they described what they saw off the corridors, which were rooms that looked like hospital rooms. And the one that we went through most of the hypnotic regression was placed in a room, unclothed, and placed on a table that he couldn't tell whether it was jutting out of the wall or whether it was on a pedestal. And although he thought it was metallic, it was neither hot nor cold. It was very form-fitting. But then an instrument was used that he described that actually put the implant in his wrist. And when he did this, he didn't feel too much of anything. But if he got nervous and so on, always one of the gray beings would come very close to him, and with their black eyes, they would get very close and look into their eyes, and this aura of calmness would come over them. Once this was done, they were examined and taken out, and the three kids were back together again in this large hangar-like room. And the next thing they remember, they're lying back on the campsite again, and the craft is slowly moving up, and bang, it was gone. So they didn't know what to think, or whether they had a nightmare or something happened, or just didn't understand the entire situation. One of the things that makes this case so unusual is that all three kids did something very strange after that, like a suggestion was put in their heads or whatever, but they actually stole into this person's backyard that had a vegetable garden, and they tore up the vegetables and ate them. And that's one of the most unusual cases that I've heard of yet. So they must have been told to do this for some reason, because some folks that are involved in the abduction phenomena come back with symptoms. They feel muscle aches, pain, fatigue, feelings of the flu, dehydration, and so on. But the three kids, in asking them questions, of course they weren't kids when we did the surgery, but in asking them, if they had any ill effects from it, they don't recall anything. So maybe what they got out of the vegetables was something that obliterated the symptoms that abductees have.
Now, what procedures and protocols do you follow for the surgery?
Well, the procedures and protocols that we follow have to be kept 100% in order to make this a scientific study, because we try and stay with the scientific method. One of the things we do is when a patient contacts me, they have to convince me that they have an object. And that's either through an X-ray or a CAT scan. We don't accept MRIs because MRIs can produce false positives for foreign objects. For example, in an MRI, if you're looking through a slice right through the top of a blood vessel and there's blood flowing through a vessel, you'll see a nice bright spot. but there's not a foreign object. All it is a cut through a blood vessel. So if they send me x-rays or a CAT scan, then I take them to the radiologist and I get it confirmed that this is a foreign body, and what his guesstimation of the material is. Is it more dense than the surrounding bone? Is it less dense than the surrounding bone? We know if it's more dense than the surrounding bone, it's probably on the metallic side. Also, we have other consultants that we use. For example, we've had a couple of cases that were dental cases, and these were dental x-rays. So we have dental experts that go ahead and will look at the x-rays, and then they'll make suggestions as to whether they need further films, a Panner X or a CAT scan. So once it's been established that there is an object there, then the next thing we do is we send that client a package of questions, and they have to answer all the questions. There are no right and there are no wrong answers, but it gives us a complete background of what the possibility of their actually being involved with the abduction program is. Also, one of the forms amongst this questionnaire is a gradable form on probabilities. So if they're over 35% probable, then they've been involved. Now, lots of people step on things. Lots of people have, they want 2 seconds of fame on television or to get filmed. There's a lot of reasons for people that contact me. They may be not abductees at all. Some abductees don't get along well with the problems. And as the late John Mack wrote in his book, there are 7 traumas that are involved with alien abduction, and only one of them is the event itself. Another one is who are you going to tell? Who's going to believe you? So you have this argument that goes on continuously. So a lot of these people are not well adjusted. A lot of abductees have problems. They can become alcoholics, drug addicts. They can be confined in mental institutions. So you have to sift out these people to become part of this study, and this is one of the first things we do. Then once they are accepted as a possible surgical candidate, do they want the surgery? Do they want it removed? And if so, if they agree that they do want it removed, they have to understand that the product that we're going to remove becomes the ownership becomes part of A&S research, and that we promise to give to the rest of the world as scientific knowledge. And if they're not willing to do that, then we don't accept them as a patient. So if we look at statistical numbers, let's say 10% out of 100 might be a true surgical candidate. 1% of them will only be ones that we'll operate on.
Now, have any scientists tried to talk to you and give possible explanations for what it is instead of aliens, and try to prove you wrong?
When I talk to the academic scientific community, they're also interested in the analysis and the intrigue of what they're looking at on a scientific academic basis. That they don't even offer a lot of times suggestions. If we do it and they're being paid, for example, for a television program, they'll actually get them to lie on camera.
Wow.
Also, scientists, by and large, are prey to higher masters, as other people, in other fields of occupations do. They have to earn their paycheck. They have to feed their families. So, and they could be threatened. They can be threatened by any agency of the government, for example. Not so much anymore, but in earlier years, yes.
To what extent do you think is the government hiding information from us? Do you think they know? Do you think they have contact with aliens?
I think that the government historically has made contact with aliens, and there's most probably been deals that have been made. We have enough witnesses now, for example, Holloman Air Force situation in which at Holloman Air Force Base, where Air Force One was seen to land. The base was literally frozen. No one could move from their post when this was going on. There was lots of witnesses to things that were happening. Two electricians, up on a pole were told to stay there and not move till all this was over, and that was near the runway. Then they saw 3 circular craft come flying overhead. One of them began to hover over the runway when Air Force One stopped. Another one took off and went 20 miles away and hovered over a park, and the third one was somewhere else lingering around. And it was said by the lineman, who had a good view of this whole thing, that President Eisenhower at the time, got out of that plane, walked over to the craft. They saw a ramp come down. He walked up the ramp and shook hands with some kind of a non-human being. Went in, was there for about 20 minutes, came back out again. The alien craft took off. Air Force One took off. And instead of following the rules and regs that they had set up for landings at that base, they took off and flew directly within 50 feet off the roof of the hospital.
Jeez.
So this has been, cited as one of the examples, but certain presidents were in the know, certain presidents were not probably in the know. And today, I believe that the situation is totally different. I believe that most of this information today is in the hands of the giant monarchs of industry, these multilateral companies that are, some of them are part of the military-industrial complex, and some of them are industry itself. And it's the greed that keeps propelling this on and on and on. But it looks like they're getting to the point now where they're starting to eat each other, because I guarantee you that Standard Oil, with its concentration on fossil fuel energy, is not really interested in what Monsanto is doing, making GMO foods. And Monsanto, with GMO foods, is not really interested in a free energy system that somebody else might develop. So things are changing rapidly, and of course with the citizen hearing that's going to be held at the end of the month in Washington, D.C., and it will be streamed out to the world. We expect half the population of the world to watch this congressional hearing, and hope that the government will actually start releasing information.
With trillions of planets in the universe, it's hard to believe that planet Earth is unique. Odds are that life exists elsewhere. And while life on some planets may be less advanced than us, chances are that more advanced life forms will also exist. So the question becomes, will these advanced life forms have the ability to travel to Earth? And, if so, secretly tag us with extraterrestrial hardware during their visits? Prior to interviewing Dr. Leir, I might have said no. But while I still have my doubts, Dr. Leir makes a fascinating case for this, and now I'd like to know more.
Jack, in his quest for the answer, has reached out to Third Phase of Moon to speak with the alien abductees who've had implants removed by Dr. Roger Leir. We have provided him the contact information. Mary, who wants to remain anonymous, and Tim Cullen have come forward to speak with Jack and answer his questions in regards to their alien abduction and the implants removed by Dr. Roger Leir.
Hi, I'm Jack. Tell me about your abduction.
I have had, my family, it runs in my family. My brother has had experiences. His family, since the marriage, has had experiences. My husband underwent experiences, as did I, from being married into my family. It seems like that was the protocol for marrying into the family. And because I had had unusual experiences from the time I was really, really small, and my brother too, from the time he was an infant. And I believe they started with my mom and dad, because my dad had had some sightings. I had had a sighting. My mother had a sighting of a UFO over our home. it ran in the family, and there were a lot of experiences that my husband and I had in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, and he would actually get night terrors, which we thought were from, he was a Vietnam veteran, had experiences in Vietnam, and thought it was post-traumatic stress syndrome. It turns out it wasn't from Vietnam. He actually then started remembering in the early 90s that the night terrors he was experiencing was from these creatures being in our home and taking us at night.
What was your reaction when you realized you had been abducted by extraterrestrials?
Let's see, it was removed in 1996, probably about 6 months to a year sooner. Before that, I realized I had a scoop mark on my leg, and I did not know there was an implant in there. Had no idea. I just saw this scar on my leg and on my left calf. And when Roger was, I was assistant section director and then section director of MUFON for Ventura, Santa Barbara counties, and Roger was helping me, and he had arranged to do surgeries, and he had gotten funding through Bigelow, and for 3 surgeries, we had 3 people that were going to have supposed implants removed. Roger had gone through the x-ray process and exam process. Well, one of them was Whitley Strieber. He had an object in his ear, and he was to be one of our guest speakers and then go ahead and have a surgery. Last minute, he decided against having the object removed from his ear, and it's on the outside of his ear. He still has it today. It's under the skin on the back of the ear. And he decided against it. Well, we had funding for 3 surgeries, and Roger was, Dr. Leir was beside himself as to, what was he going to do. And I said, well, you can remove this scar off my leg, whatever it is. I don't know how I got it, but make that the 3rd surgery. And he said, that's fine. He says, but we have to go through the examination process. We'll need to get x-rays, blood tests, which we did. And on the x-ray, surprising both to myself and him, he saw an object on the x-ray that was just under the scar, the scoop mark I had. And that's how we discovered that there was actually an object under the scoop mark.
What was your reaction to the news that aliens had implanted a device in you?
I was shocked that there was anything under that scoop mark to begin with. I didn't know how I obtained that mark, but it was an unusual mark, and it seemed to just appear. At least I just noticed it. I think he was shocked because that was the first time he had ever had a scoop mark with an object under it. So he was shocked. I was shocked. And I kept trying to, rationalize that, maybe I just got something in my leg. And after it was, extracted and examined, it was nothing. I kept saying, are you sure this wouldn't be found in a regular body? Is there any way? And he goes, no, Alice. This would not be found in your leg. It could not, it would not be there naturally by any means. It wasn't a calcification or anything like that. It had a lot of unusual characteristics, and he's since then done some more surgeries that have had the same type of object.
Is there anything else you want to add?
Well, I think he's doing something that is so important, and he helps so many people, and he never asks for anything, in return from anybody that he tries to help. He's just, he's doing it because he has not only the ability to do it, but he has the need to find out what is really going on, the curiosity as to what's going on. It's affected him. Everything he does, his life, his career, he's very dedicated to trying to find out, what these objects are. And also, with these objects, we're finding that they have no inflammatory response around the object. Could this technology help the medical profession now in dealing with transplants, where these people with transplants have to be on horrific medications for many, many years, where if this technology could be developed where there would be no rejection. I mean, it would be wonderful for the people that have to go through this with the transplants. So, I mean, he's doing it for a lot of reasons, but he does it. It's a labor of love for him and curiosity, and he feels very dedicated to trying to help people, because a lot of people, with these type of situations, they just don't know who to turn to or what to do. Unfortunately, he's there to try to help.
Where was your chip implanted?
The implant was it was located in my left wrist area, arm wrist area, almost identical to the 15th surgery Dr. Leir done on Ron Noel. His implant is the same shape as mine, a cantaloupe seed type object, and located in basically the left wrist area. In fact, we kind of wonder if we could almost put the x-rays over each other and they'd almost be in the same spot.
Did it hurt after the surgery?
Yeah, when they got a hold of the object, it felt, I felt it, a lot of pressure and uncomfortable with my arm. Like it was, got chicken winged, and I kind of had to carry it in a sling for a little while, but then it calmed down. It really, like I said, it was just like it was just being, the arm was being abused. I realized this thing was hooked to my nervous system because when I became aware of it, it was like it was aware of me and I was aware of it.
Welcome back to Third Phase of Moon. My name is Blake Cousins, and in this episode, we're going to go over, by popular demand, the Alien Human Project Part 2. Dr. Roger Leir and his claims of removing alien implants isn't a doubt. It is scientific fact. Now for this exclusive Part 2, the Alien Human Project. Let's get to it.
It's the alien implant doctor, world-renowned. Dr. Leir, when we made Alien Human Project Part 1, it had global impact. We've had people that came out that never wanted to talk about their experiences, and now because of the courage that you've put yourself out to get those implants, they now have come forward. What inspired you to continue to do this in the face of all these ridicule?
Well, you mean, of course, the fine line that I walk.
Yes.
The line of academia, medicine, and research into a tremendously unknown subject. And I say unknown subject, although it's been in existence for thousands of years, because there really isn't that much physical evidence of, things that happen within the field of ufology. We've seen things flying in their skies. We've looked at drawings and cave paintings and wood carvings that have been in existence for thousands of years. But, people have been looking for the so-called smoking gun. And that's what we seem to have found. Maybe on purpose and maybe by accident. I'm not convinced to this day. Why is it that I'm the only one, it seems to be, on this entire planet that seems to be removing objects from individuals and then subject them to severe academic analysis and come up with things that are not from this world?
You just got to my next point exactly. When you look at a photograph now, 50 years ago, a photograph would have been proof, but now with Photoshop, it could be doctored. What you've been removing is the smoking gun, and a lot of critics, especially the skeptics, always have an explanation for it. Let's go deeper into why we can prove this is the smoking gun and how you would want to invite the academics to look at the lab reports that you've gotten.
Well, as to whether I consider myself an academic science, I don't. I'm more like the plumber or the purveyor of the merchandise. I get it out of the human body, the individual that has it, and then I present it to science, as an ordinary individual. I'm sure they have some respect because of my medical background, but it's the word that comes from them after analysis that they are telling me that these objects contain things like non-terrestrial isotopic ratios, that they contain carbon nanotube structures, which are very complex. And we're looking at a technology which 8, maybe 9 years ago, there were scientists, noted academic scientists that said they couldn't exist. And now there are companies who are actually using them, making them. Japan is trying to make them into a cloth so that they make clothing out of them. They're talking about a space tower because they are the strongest substance known to man. And if you build a space tower that goes up a mile or two above the Earth and then launch a vehicle from there, you've saved a tremendous amount of money in fuel because you don't have to defeat the amount of gravity that you do from an Earth launch. So we find carbon nanotechnology, and we find things that we don't understand. We find gold spheres, for example, that we don't understand what they do. We find apertures in the metal which are only as wide as one atom. Now that's pretty small. And we haven't been able to yet look down into that aperture and see what's down in there. But one day we will do that. We know that they emit radio waves. We know that they have electromagnetic fields and an electromagnetic residue, which lasts for about 30 to 60 days following their removal. So these are all scientific facts. These are facts that in written reports I get from academia, and I mean top academia, because we have 3 of the world's finest nuclear physicists on our science board for ANS research. And that's not including the myriad of other well-respected laboratories, like Los Alamos National Labs, Southwest Labs, and I could go on and on and on with a list of laboratories.
One thing I love is what separates you from all the other researchers is you are a doctor and a scientist that works with data. Like you said, you're just a plumber. You pull these out and it's the lab reports that are telling you what this is. So everybody out there who's listening and watching this documentary, request the lab reports. They are available to be read. As a matter of fact, aren't they on your website?
Yes, there's a number of different laboratories. The reports listed on the website. And we also have taken consideration that the initial scientific results came from the National Institute for Discovery Science, which was Bob Bigelow. And he is the one that paid for and got the reports and material from Los Alamos National Labs and New Mexico Tech. So I had nothing to do with it at all. Just presenting him with the specimens and having him send them to the laboratory. And when they came back originally, there was a giant booklet of data. However, there was no report. And that irritated Mr. Bigelow to the point where he called the lab up and he said, look, I'm paying for this. I want a report. And that's when the first report came in. And the scientists that looked at it said these were closest to meteorite samples. Now that was a shock.
You just mentioned Arthur or Bob Bigelow, who was well known for the Skinwalker Ranch. His name has been thrown around ufology for the last couple of years. He's somewhat been in the limelight. Do you think with his Skinwalker Ranch, the laboratory results that he got from funding your research, did he possibly make anything from what he learned?
And monetary gain, absolutely no. He put out all his money, never asked me to spend a penny. And now he, of course, has a company called Bigelow Aerospace. And with the consent of the government, he's in a position where he can actually regulate some things because of the nature of the space business.
When Mr. Bigelow became involved, he's linked with SpaceX, which is making enormous leaps. They just tested a new rocket, which is called the Grasshopper, a reusable rocket that's not going to burn up in the atmosphere. Do you think, with the lab reports that I was saying, do you think he used any of the findings to apply them to his technologies in SpaceX or anything else that he's doing?
That I can't answer. I don't know, because I'm not knowledgeable of what it takes to put a vehicle into space. Now the next thing is that I know that he took designs that he purchased from NASA. For example, the expandable module. That didn't have anything to do with what the findings that I was finding with the implant subject. But yet it took a technology that he developed, and he put up, the Genesis space module, Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, and then looked at all the data coming in, and they are much, much safer space vehicles than the International Space Station.
Let's go back and talk about the actual technology. One thing I love is our technology as a human race grows, we're able to dive in these things deeper. One thing you mentioned was single-sized atom particles. What on earth can be made into a size of one atom? Virtually nothing that a human being can do, right?
Well, now we can use single-size atom and what we call nanotechnology. That is nanotechnology. If you take a single carbon atom and you string two of them together, and then three and then four, and put them in a circle, then you have a circle of carbon nano atoms. And if you extend this into a tube, you have a CNT, or a carbon nanotube. Now, if you extend that out, then you have something that's similar to wiring without insulation. So let's say you take one of these carbon nano strands and you wrap two of them together, and then you can actually make a cable and you get a carbon nano bundle. But this is sub-microscopic. You have to look at this on the level of an electron microscope. So we have it. We are using it. And this is from what I understand from reliable sources, is the basis for communication in the future. Just as Star Trek talked about, going to subspace frequency. Well, how do you communicate if you're in deep space? Are you going to wait the length of time that it takes us to get a signal from Mars back to Earth? No. So you go into another technology, which is scalar wave technology, faster than the speed of light. And some laboratories, very few, I won't mention who they are, but they are conducting experiments with scalar waves, and they told me that this is the communication of the future, both in television and radio communication.
Carbon nanotubes, or the nanotechnology that we humans are using now, was not available when you first removed the first implant, correct?
That is absolutely correct. Carbon nanotubes were an argument. It was only existent in the minds of certain scientists that said, perhaps carbon nanotubes exist in nature, but we can't find them. Perhaps they could exist if you could make them. But then the other half said, no, it's impossible. You can't make them. And now to see what that technology was then and what the technology is today, because a carbon nanotube today can be single-walled, double-walled, triple-walled, and you still have that aperture in the center, like the center of a hose. And you can put other material in that center, and that's called a doped carbon nanotube. So let's say you make a very small one, very small doped carbon nanotube let's say that the substance in the middle of it is a very potent antibiotic. You can give that person an injection of that antibiotic in this carbon nanotube and have the carbon nanotube go directly to the area of the infection, a tumor or something else, or a drug to treat cancer, for example. So the implications of carbon nanotube technology alone are, pardon the pun, out of this world.
You mentioned that there were scientists debating on both sides, yet you had something in your possession that was artificially made that contained those. Now, do you think, fast forward to when humans started using things on the nanotechnology level, do you think that it's possible the government may have seen your lab reports and may have used certain labs, you've used that to actually get to us humans using this nanotechnology?
Well, the possibility of government looking at my work and copying it, so to speak, or using the things that our scientists have illuminated, I doubt whether that's true, because a lot of this may have gone back to Roswell back engineering. We're talking about almost 60 some odd years. They've had a 60 some odd years, let's say, jump on anything that I ever did. So I'm sure that within the black budget projects, they already know all the stuff that we're learning and trying to present to the public and to industry. Because some say that black budget technology, in compared to academic science, is 100 years ahead.
But again, when we're talking about carbon nanotubes, you also mentioned something about gold sphere. Can you expand on that a little bit?
These small gold spheres that we find, but we don't know what they do. We also find what are called orthorhombic crystals, and these are crystals composed of sodium chloride. Now, sodium chloride is just ordinary table salt, but the crystals of the salt are random. There's no particular shape. These are a particular rectangular shape and in varying sizes. So they're called orthorhombic sodium chloride crystals. Now, if we think back to the early days of radio, and what did we have? We had a crystal set, and a copper wire, and an earphone, and a battery, and we were able to get a miraculous radio station through a crystal. Well, crystallography, or crystallography, the study of crystals today, still can't explain what happens with the atomic structure inside a crystal that will allow a frequency to be carried and then received.
And yet
as far as we know.
And we've been using that.
And we've been using that constantly until we went to a different technology, which was the vacuum tube and then transistor technology. But in all the radios, all during World War II, all the aircraft radios, when you switched from one station to the other, all a lever was doing was going from one crystal to another crystal to another crystal. They were all multiplex crystal sets.
Again, more proof that using something without possibly knowing it, and what can that lead to. Now, I want to focus more on why this is the smoking gun, because we know it's the smoking gun, yet those people out there watching this, some of the people who left on the comments, and this first one was released to great fanfare, and there was a lot of people that said, wow, this really is happening and it's there. But there still is others who are on the fence. Let's dive deeper into proving to them. We got the lab reports, we see the carbon nanotubes, we see the gold spheres. Let's talk about the radio waves and the electromagnetism results, and what else you can tell everybody.
Okay, first of all, there's a certain percentage of these that we've removed, that about 70%, that emit a radio wave in the FM band. And when we looked at a classified chart of where these frequencies occur, both in the kilohertz and megahertz range, We know that they are deep space, fixed or mobile deep space frequencies. Now, the question is, are we really detecting deep space frequencies, or are we merely detecting a harmonic of some other transmission of another kind of a wave, as that I mentioned before, a scalar wave technology that enters our electromagnetic spectrum, and we get what's called a harmonic. And that harmonic in our spectrum are these radio waves that we receive. Now, the other possibility, of course, which in today's world you can't deny, is the possibility that a deal has been made between somebody from out there and somebody from here, so that they can gain the same data that somebody from out there is listening to. And I believe this is biological data, and it's data having to do with the progression of our DNA. Because if we look at abduction cases all over the world, we see that there's the taking of sperm and ova. That means a genetic experiment is being carried out on human beings on the face of this planet. And if that's true, then maybe they want to find out, just like we do using human logic, how long a bear sleeps or hibernates during the winter, what the metabolism of the body. For example, John Glenn, when he went into space, he complained on national TV of having to swallow implants because it was necessary for mission control to know his body functions, and the only way that they could get it in was to have him swallow them. So he did. He swallowed them, and they got the information. But, you know, to make a comparison, suppose somebody else wanted to know the information that NASA was getting. They would, you know, tune in on it, and they would be able to get it too, because they're not operating in a scalar wave or unknown technology. So those are the two possibilities. One is that they are true radio frequencies that we're getting, or that they are harmonic of something like a scalar wave which travels through space faster than the speed of light.
Since the last film, Alien Human Project 1, there have been significant changes, such as the citizen hearing. Can you tell everybody in the world who's watching this what changes you've had, including your testimony there, what else you've done, what else your research has unlocked?
Well, in case the viewer of this program doesn't know what the citizen's hearing is, it was a hearing that was conducted in Washington, D.C. at the National Press Club. And it was set up to mimic the way a hearing would be conducted in Congress. And we had retired congressional members that composed a committee that would conduct a hearing just as if it was in Congress. And we also know now that while the congressional hearing was going on, President Obama was in residence down the street. And we also have information leading to believe that he knew exactly what was going on with the conference that we were having. So since that time, you know, an effort is being made, including me as one of the witnesses that testified, to try and get that information, because it's a worldwide event. It's not a United States event. It affects the entire planet. And so we want to get this information out to the public. So I'm working with Steve Bassett and the Paradigm Group on several different projects. Each one works in conjunction with the other. The first thing is to get the 35 hours of testimony in a DVD set out to the public, out to the public in general. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to send each single member of Congress, their assistants, and the White House staff and the president a full set of copies of this hearing. That's number one. Number two is that Senator Mike Gravel and Congresswoman Carolyn Kirkpatrick is working on a situation where there'll be a bill that will go before the United Nations General Assembly, and we're trying to get a hearing before the United Nations General Assembly. So these are two of the 3 projects that I'm involved in now. So it's public education, education of the entire planet, that we have been and are being visited and interfered with by non-terrestrial beings, whether they be from another dimension or another planet or somewhere else or within the earth or already living here. Entities that have been kept in secret from the general public of the planet. We want that knowledge out. So that's one of my primary goals since we did the last alien-human contact.
That's what the goal of Third Phase of Moon is, to get the word out. The mainstream media is not doing their job, and that's exactly why we're interviewing here you again, because you have, like we said, the smoking gun, and we really hope people pay attention to it. Now, one of the Roper polls said 1 in 40 people have been abducted, which is a staggering number. The people that have had them removed, have any of them had a repeat abduction where another insertion was made?
In short, has anyone had any new installations of implants? And as far as I know, no. Now you got to remember that it's not every single abductee that gets implanted. We figure, that there's something close to human logic that they may be using. So what we do is about 15% of the species that we are studying will get implanted so we can remotely get the information we need. Not to say that myself or anyone else should have the ego to try and look at the logic of a civilization which may be 80 to 100 million years older than we are. How could we possibly conceive their thought processes or compare their thought process to us? But if we base this only on human logic, you don't have to implant every single abductee subject. And since they're working with humans, again, maybe they have to lower themselves to human resources and human technology in order to get the information that they need. So that's possible too. It may be just as hard for an 80 million or a year old civilization to communicate with us thought-wise than it is for us to conceive of them being able to do what they do.
Do you think by you removing those 17 implants may have possibly disrupted them to want to put them in more secretive areas?
The answer to that is no, because it seems to me that if they wouldn't allow me to take these out, in a literature search I did before I ever started doing this, nobody was ever successful in removing a suspected alien implant. They would turn to powder or disappear or whatever. So maybe there is a group that says, yes, you go ahead, take them out, because in certain individuals we don't need them anymore, and go ahead, analyze them, and then reach out, to the public and give this to the public as public knowledge, because one of these days there's going to be openness between us and the human race on planet Earth. So, but, not to say that there is another group that might be involved that said, oh, we're going to make sure that they can't take this out. But interesting, there has been evidence that people have had implants come out of an eye. Also, one of the most famous implants of all has been implants that have been in the nose, associated with nosebleeds and the whole gamut of things that go along with it. I don't have one of those. I've never seen one, but I've heard story after story after story. And I guess if I keep doing this, maybe someone will come along and sneeze, and they'll actually sneeze into a cloth or Kleenex or whatever, and there one will be, and we can look at it.
Now that we're talking about medical procedures in essence, I wanted to touch on something you mentioned in the last film, that there's no inflammatory response upon removal or insertion of these objects. Can you reiterate to the world how important this is to the medical community if they would just take a look at your research?
Well, if we could get academic research medicine to look at the materials, it is very possible that we could duplicate what is the cause of this non-rejection, non-inflammatory reaction, and duplicate it and use it in, for example, wrapping a pin, a screw, a liver, a heart, or any transplanted organ into the body. And being that it's your own DNA, you wouldn't reject it. You wouldn't have to be taking anti-rejection medication for the rest of your life at a tremendous loss. I'm going to be very honest. It would be a tremendous economic loss to the pharmaceutical industry. So do they really want that to happen? I mean, the public certainly would love it to happen. Now, I was just perusing an article on modern 3D printers, and they expect within 5 years, 5 short years, that they will be able to reproduce a cardiac cell and have it duplicate in a 3D printer a human heart with its the same DNA. A person will not be waiting for a donor. They'll just duplicate this in a 3D biological printer, and they'll install it into the body. And you won't need any of that medication, that anti-rejection medication.
It's ironic you mentioned 3D printing. As a matter of fact, on the news the other night, they showed a demonstration of a 3D printer making a pizza. Yeah. Now let's get to a final message you have to the world. Anything you want to tell them. Viewers, skeptics, believers alike, everybody. What would you have to say?
What I would say would be to repeat what Senator Gravel said to us at the closing of the citizens' hearing. And that if you really want an impact on the world for this subject, don't leave it up to governments to do it. Do it yourself. Each individual. It's their responsibility to get this information out to the rest of the world. Then governments have to respond. So I always say, if you find a researcher that you deem as credible, and they have a DVD, or they have a book, or they have something else that you can pass out, buy 1 or 2 of them and give them away as presents. Give a DVD as a birthday present, or as a Christmas present, or as a wedding present, or anniversary, whatever. Give something of knowledge away to that person who may look at it, read it, see it, and that person could get excited and give one away to somebody else. So we could pass that on through the whole world and continue to use the advancing world of communication, where we have an increase in devices almost every week because of the competitiveness of the way that the electronics industry is being conducted. There's always, another iPhone, another this, another that, another gadget you can hold in your hand with more and more and more information in it. Where's the app on ETs? Somebody's going to do it.
I completely agree. You heard it all from the man himself. Thank you very much, Dr. Roger Leir.
My pleasure.